Hi, I'm Natalie Brunell, and thanks so much for checking out the Coin Stories podcast video page. I am talking to the legends in Bitcoin about their backstories, career paths, and why they believe in BTC. This podcast does not provide financial advice. This episode is brought to you by the Bitcoin Conference 2022. It's going to be held in Miami next year, April 6th through 9th, and it is going to be a 4-day amazing festival with 2 general admission days, an industry day, and Soundfest. Tens of thousands of people will make their way to Miami, and I wanted to share some photos from the 2021 conference because that event is one of the reasons Coin Stories took off, and I was able to secure such amazing interviews with legends like Michael Saylor. Now, you want to get your ticket pretty soon because hotels are booking up fast. I know I recently just booked. So head to b.tc/conference to get your pass and use Coin Stories as the code for 10% off. This episode is also brought to you by OKCoin, one of my favorite new places to buy Bitcoin. OKCoin is the fastest growing exchange serving over 190 countries globally with the easiest onboarding and lowest fees around. They're on a mission to make learning about and buying Bitcoin easier than ever, and they're all about bringing more financial literacy to everyone, which is something I really care about as well. From being the only exchange to integrate Lightning to contributing over $1 million to Bitcoin core devs, they are doing incredible work to further the Bitcoin ecosystem. You can head to go.okcoin.com/Natalie for $50 in Bitcoin when you sign up. Super excited to share my guest today is Doug Boneparth, the king of one-liners on Twitter. Doug is a financial guru for the Millennials. He is a wealth advisor and president of Bone Fide Wealth, which offers financial planning and advice for Gen Y. And he also happens to be bullish on Bitcoin. So I wanted to learn more about how traditional financial advisors are adapting to the space. And I also wanted to learn how to be more witty on Twitter. So without further delay, here's Doug. Okay, Doug, the one-line wonder from Twitter. I'm so excited to chat with you. Thanks for being on Coin Stories.
Oh, thank you for having me, Natalie. I appreciate it.
So let's start at the beginning. I know that you were born in New York, but then your family moved when you were 2 to South Florida and you grew up there. So tell me a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing.
Yeah, so my childhood was pretty much full of sunshine. Down in South Florida, it's always warm. It's either hot or very hot. You get to pick between these two things. So I had a really nice childhood. I grew up in a, upper middle class community, and only really, very fortunate. Had great parents. We're always, vested in our education and getting to do cool stuff like travel around the country in the summertime and get to go to camp and all the things that hopefully kids get to do and should do.
Yeah, so you were living in Boca, right? That's a pretty nice place. I know it's like a retirement community though too, right? But generally people have money there.
Yeah. So Boca Raton is certainly an affluent area. There's a lot of affluence, on the streets and cars and houses. It is a nice place, and it also has that connotation of being the retirement capital of the world. We have our own jokes like it's God's waiting room, or Look, my grandparents lived till their dying days with us, really down the street in Boca Raton, Florida. So you can imagine what kind of place this would be growing up as a young person and really an old person's town. But it's not a small place. It's a pretty big town. But having my grandparents down the street and a pretty good childhood. But I would say it is interesting to catch people and really learn from people at the later stages of their life, and not just your parents' age. I mean, really, everyone around you is your grandpa or your grandma. A lot of face pinching at the deli at 4:30. So you can imagine. It's like, how many more World War II stories can I live through? I thought I was, involved in the war one way or the other. But it was a really cool environment to learn in, for sure. And a big population from the Northeast, specifically New York, comes down to retire in South Florida. So as, a former New Yorker and someone, I also call myself a New Yorker, office is still in Lower Manhattan. It's kind of like a full circle movement, right? You're seeing all these retirees, born in, turn of the century, on the final phases of their lives. Well, you're just starting yours, and I would ultimately go to New York. So it's the circle of New York life.
Wait, okay, so being surrounded by all these boomers, what's the biggest lesson about money that you learned from them?
They weren't even boomers. My parents are the boomers. These were the generation before, the greatest generation, if you will. And if you're asking me, what I learned from them is how to keep things simple sometimes. They did not necessarily They certainly didn't grow up or exist in a time that we do now, whether it's through technology and the web or really how the financial systems have evolved, right? They're better at cash accounting and watching money come in and out because they had to be more careful. And maybe there was less temptation. We have social media pushing us in all these directions. I feel like the American dream was more simplistic. Look, grandpa went to war, won, came back, started a business, started a family, and that GI Bill plus that American elbow grease and starting a business, that's the American dream. And I don't think that's really lost on future generations, millennials and even Gen Z. I just think the way we have to go about doing that and the environment, certainly the financial environment that we live in, is categorically different and maybe even more challenging. Or rather than say someone has it more challenging than the other, it's just different. These are our challenges that we have to face. I think a good deal of respect needs to go back and forth between what it is we have to overcome in our own lives to become successful or define success on our terms.
Well, I want to get into some of those points a little bit later. But first, when you were growing up, I know that your dad was a certified financial planner, right? And he was an entrepreneur, but you didn't necessarily want to go down that path. It seems like he sort of influenced you, sort of, I don't know, shoved it down your throat in a way, and then you decided to go in that direction.
I was led into the profession. So I grew up around it, right? So I'd watch my father from 91, that would make me 7 years old, change his career into becoming a financial advisor. And the thing he liked the most about it was the emergence of financial planning, right? It wasn't just selling products like brokers did in the 80s and early 90s and even throughout the 90s. This was a way for his engineering mind and background to apply personal finance in a systematized way to clients and then be able to position them in products. So I learned early on a very different way to approach wealth management through financial planning as opposed to through products or the sales of whether it be mutual funds, stocks, insurance, and things like that. And being exposed around it, I guess, I never really pushed away from it, but it really came down to coming home from school my freshman year. So where it got real formal, was I think his concern that I was having way too much fun in college, and what was I gonna do? I wasn't really doing too well in the business school. I was thinking about changing up to go do journalism. And I think that kind of scared him. And not that there's really anything wrong with making a change in your track. I think he just saw I had no idea what I really wanted for myself and what I was doing. And his reaction to that was, well, let's bring him into what I'm doing, which was financial planning. And again, I never really said like, I would never do this. He thought it lent itself very well to some of the skills that I had. And the challenge was to pass my Series 7 after my freshman year. And I did. And I didn't really stop after that. It was go get your 66 and your insurance license and learn this bit of software, learn how to talk to a client, learn how to run a business. Because this was his third or fourth business in his career. I think he really wanted not to just, show how to do it, but also put you in the driver's seat. And that, I think, was the most valuable thing he gave me, was the knowledge and the experience, because I could take that, and I did, and I ran with it. Sorry, Dad, it didn't work out, but it didn't need to. And as a parent myself, like, I want to give and equip my kids with the skills to be successful in this world. And I think a splash of luck and a good dad and good parenting and a good brain in my head all came together. And here we are, 17 years later.
Wait, okay. So where did you go to undergrad?
So I went to the University of Florida. Go
Okay.
Gators.
Okay.
If you did well in high school in the state of Florida, you got incentivized, if not, really hooked up to go stay in state. So me and all my friends, we all head up to the University of Florida. It was the best school we could get into in the state of Florida. And we went to go party 3 hours north and do the big football thing. We won championships. It was insane. Kind of the timeline we were on to go not only to college, but that specific college. And, that's even where I met my wife. So it all worked out really well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I know you mentioned that you are with your college sweetheart. And after you graduated, you went to work for your dad, but she went off to the East Coast, New York, but you it was not the best of work home environment. You were like most millennials, you moved home with your parents.
Yeah, I cry. Very on brand, right? Go home, live with your parents. And I think that was actually, it wasn't living with my parents that was the kiss of death. I think it was living with my parents while working with a parent that really was very tough to overcome. I don't think, the part in my life that I disliked the most wasn't even, I mean, middle school should jump to everyone's, like going through puberty is like terrible experience and being confused. I think like 23 through 25 is the second coming of adulthood. Your body's not changing, I hope, but everything else is, and no one's really you don't really know where you are or what your purpose is. And to do that back in, your home, working for a parent, never having an escape, and all your friends are all over the place, if not, certainly not where you are, was a really tough environment to be in. And I think the biggest driver there was the person that I loved was in law school in New York City. We'd spent all 4 years of college together and didn't really think about how we would end up together again, other than knowing push would come to shove. And look, the writing was on the wall. I wanted it to work out. I wanted to take the skills that I was given. I wanted to prove it to myself, to everyone, that I could go to New York City with 4 boxes of material things, student loan debt, and go for it. And then even if I failed, I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't try. So, this, if anyone's thinking, oh, how good he had it to work in this business and get set up and go to New York City, quite the contrary. It was a hellscape to get out of for a little while. I had to borrow money from my mom to get out of my car lease. So I'm on the hook to the federal government for student loans. I owe my mom money. I found a random roommate on Craigslist to go live in Murray Hill in New York City and see if I could get a job working in wealth management.
Okay, wait, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a personal question on a tangent, but I have to ask, I'm curious, because most millennial guys, they are not looking to settle down and chase a girl somewhere. They're like so focused on their job. They have to make it to a certain level before they settle down. So, I mean, what was it about? I mean, did you just know that she was the one, or why would you make that decision when you're essentially very, very young?
Yeah. And as much as she was a big driver to it, I don't know if she was the majority factor to this. I think it, and very well could have been, my heart was far away from me, and I needed to see that through, on top of needing to see through what my own abilities were. I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's all of those things. You have a love story, you have an entrepreneurial story, you have an ego and what can you do for yourself story. That continues to play on to this day. And these narratives are what drive us as people. And hopefully we latch on to things that provide us with joy and validation and, peace of mind and heart, because the things you're doing are worth it for the time that you get here on this earth. So without getting too, too out there, I think that's really what was at the core of it. Is, as a person, I had a lot I needed to see through, and it wasn't in Boca Raton, Florida. It was in New York City. And maybe I'm just creating a very, lovely story for the fact that when I was a kid, we went to New York City and my head kept looking up at the buildings. I couldn't stop staring. I don't know. Maybe it was at that moment that I knew I'd be destined to go back and do something there.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. So, well, you landed and then the recession hit, right? Lehman Brothers pretty much went under. So, tell me about those first, I don't know, years of your career there and sort of navigating this recession where I'm sure you saw, obviously, the government rushed in, printed a bunch of money, bailed everybody out. So, give me, your take on all that.
Sure. I think it would be years after that I would reflect on like what was happening with the long-term effects of bailouts and what we're talking about even today with coming out of COVID and seeing even more enormous printing. But what I was getting at that moment was very nervous that I just got off an airplane at JFK and Lehman collapses. And I don't even think I understood the gravity of that. I just knew things were bad, or about to be bad. The roommate that I found on Craigslist was doing equity research. And I just remember meeting him the first time. He's like, well, whatever Washington Mutual stock I bought the other day is now worth nothing. And I was like, a bank is kind of, it was all starting to, unfold at that moment. And again, I don't even know if he understood the gravity of it. Probably did. It was very smart. Anyways, it was off to a rocky start. I think first thing I said to myself is, you really know how to pick it, Doug. Like, your timing's impeccable here. You decide to move to New York City, the financial capital of the world, when the world of finance is seemingly burning to the ground. So I figured I was going home, like, sooner than later. Like, might as well make the best of this. My first New York, your first year in New York is one of the most amazing experiences I think people could have if they choose to move to New York. You'll never forget it. And mine was, again, Rome is burning. So I went to work and started to really just drink from the fire hose. You had a lot of clients. I was working in a wealth management practice for, it's funny, someone closer to my age now than when I was in my mid-20s then. And I was able to run their whole practice. The proposition was, I'll run the whole practice because I learned how to do that. You just grow and get clients. But here comes the recession, where now all the clients in the practice, not all, but a lot of them are calling up, obviously seeing this drawdown, and they're freaking out. So step in Doug, with his PR degree and 4 years of experience, and hopefully going to get a CFP in the next, 12 months, fielding these phone calls and really dealing with precarious situations. I mean, this is the best learning I think any advisor could get, is dealing with crisis mode. Right? People shouting, people upset, crying. You tell them you're going to retire, and now all of a sudden their idea of retirement is poof, gone, vanished, right? 30 years at a job, gone, see you later. And yeah, we haven't seen anything really like that since. And this is how I was, getting my start in New York City. And I owe a lot to that. I know it's my silver lining here. So I guess I didn't end up leaving, which was great. I actually kind of kicked into high gear. The advisor I was looking for was in and out, dealing with his own personal issues. So I really had my hands around a practice. And I kind of thought, like, if I didn't ensure its survival, I wouldn't get a paycheck and I would have to go home, is kind of how I viewed it. Like, I can make this happen for me or not. And I don't want to go home. I'm not done here. I just got here and we made it happen. So by 2010, practice has its best year on record. I think we lost 2 clients throughout the entire recession. It was a huge success, at least from a professional standpoint, and being an advisor and proving worth and understanding how to get through pretty, the hardest of environments. But that was the start, people, it was chaos. It was nuts.
I mean, I'm sure it's crazy to look back and, like, during that time when it dipped so much, I mean, it was like the worst financial crisis in decades. And then all of a sudden we're going up, 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 up. And it's just like, it almost looks like a blip now when you look back at the chart. Yeah. And we've climbed all these new record highs. So what do you think when you look back on all of that?
Everything kind of changed from that moment. I mean, you have the birth of decentralized finance right in there. And I think that's the sneaky thing, right? That's the thing we forget about a lot, is how that fracture in the traditional, that fracture of trust right there is kind of the spawn for where we find ourselves today, with a big echo of it now coming from 2020. Right? It's just like, hey, that drum beat was there. Now it's really banging harder. It never went away. So it's just crazy to see what's happened from that. And we can point to, hey, did the Fed and the US government, say we can never allow that to happen again. Right? So we're going to come up with ways to prevent it from, the boomers can't not retire. Right? How do we, and look, that goes down many veins depending on how you want to spin that, right? Selfish older people who just want to raid the coffers so they don't, lose their entitlement, to retirement. All the way to, we have, you can put the emotion, there's a lot of emotion in there. You put that aside. Well, we have fundamental issues we need to deal with monetary policy and our financial systems and our infrastructure, which kind of, when you look at our real infrastructure, is all out of date, from the financial infrastructure to the roads and everything. It's on us now to be like, all right, what are we working with? And I think, this is going on a tangent, but I think the part that frustrates me the most is that I've never felt more confident of our generations X, Y, and Z to address these problems and do the work. I know we're smart enough. I know we are. We're the most educated generations out there. Like we build and create every day in new ways. And I just feel like it won't get out of the way. Like, let us have, I'm 37 with 2 kids. Like, it's been 18 years in a professional setting. Like, it's frustrating, right? It's frustrating when I know our minds can get together. And then it's somewhat of relief to see finally some of that work, some of that new generational tech, or find the infrastructure that we're building behind the scenes, right? Going back to 0809 is now emerging and is moving faster than anything has really moved. And that's what gets me so excited. And I think that that's an undertold story from 0809.
Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you sort of discovered Bitcoin and crypto and your thoughts on it. But first, I know that you went to business school, and one of the reasons why you wanted to focus on millennials is because you saw your peers around you and you wanted to help them. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because you're right. I mean, millennials are the most educated in history, but yet they carry the least amount of wealth. And we have so many issues with that, growing wealth inequality. And I think sometimes the blame is placed in the wrong direction. A lot of people blame capitalism, but I don't even think we've had true capitalism in this country for a long time. So just why did you want to focus on millennials, and how did you get your career going in that direction?
Yeah. So after, paying those dues, so to speak, I almost hate that expression in wealth management, but to a certain extent, you got to pay your dues here. After going through that gauntlet, I think it was, how do I move to the next, version of me as an advisor? Like, what's the goal here? And it's to run your own business and have your own practice. And at that time, it was cool to do that with a partner or underneath someone with more experience, as long as the game I was playing was fair, right? As long as everyone understood where the value was being created and how to distribute that from a comp or equity point of view, right? Which is its own business discussion. But I always had to address the question, how are we going to build that business? And if it's the business of financial advising or wealth management, you need clients. So how are you going to get clients? And being from Boca Raton lends itself very nicely to going after people who have money, the pre-retirees and the retirees. The issue wasn't, could I work with them or attract them? I was actually pretty good at that. It's, did I want to, right? Did I want to? And is that really the only way to do it, right? Because you're told to follow the money. I get that. Find people, your revenue is based on asset management. That's the primary. And I questioned that. That's not what I learned from Dad and watching him grow a business. So what about the planning and advice component? I know that that's a much better attraction for the asset management business. Anyways, I'm thinking, how am I going to do all of that, right? And do it in a way that I'm proud of and that is me, right? That's the millennial in me, right? How am I going to do this on my terms, right? And I was sitting in business school at NYU, and I'm probably thinking about this for a good year into the networking and getting to know my classmates, and which was a super important thing to be doing at that moment as well. And it was right before me. I think I just picked my head up one day and I was like, everyone in this room is burning midnight oil to be here, because we did a part-time MBA program for 3 years at Stern. And everyone is, talking about balancing their work. There's even classmates who are pregnant and starting their families. We're older than the full-time kids, which not a knock to them, good for going to consulting firms, good for private equity banking, your standard corporate finance type of fare where you need a 2-year training program. I'll spare you that MBA stuff. But I looked up and I said, everyone in this room is trying to get over the hurdle that we just experienced a few years ago. That's why we're here, right? To elevate ourselves and use this credential to expand our networks or our rank and position in our companies, show our value. And there it was. It's like, these are the clients. Like, these are the people. Do they have money today? Maybe, probably not. Are there assets? Maybe, probably not. But if we invest in them today, let's flip it around. Let's not have them invest in me or us. Let me invest in them, because I have this knowledge, this skill set that nobody was offered. These are Stern MBA students who lack personal financial education, just like everybody else. And I said, geez, if I can just bet on everyone here over the next 5 to 10 years, maybe they'll reinvest back into me, and these will be great clients and at the very least an amazing network. That was the bet I made. And I said, all right, because I have a PR brain here, how do we market that? How do we credentialize that? How do we become an authority around that? Luckily, I love tech, computers, creating. I've always done stuff like that. And I think, memes and social media and everything starts flooding in my brain, as well as just old school like networking. And then I had this even greater epiphany that everyone's national news is our local news in New York. Let's go leverage social media and internet to create relationships with financial media. And I brought them this new thing that was financial advisor for millennials in New York. Nobody had ever said that or tried to fight for those keywords. And I was one of the first to do it. And I was going to do it in New York City. And I knew SEO was a game that needed to be played. I knew if you're going to be looking at me as a 20-something-year-old in charge of doing these things, I got to be the goods, the CFP, the MBA, some awards would be helpful, leadership roles and associations within the profession. I just started going after each and every one of them and building out, a media network to get featured in lines and be able to assemble that all in one place to put the credibility out there. And it worked.
Amazing. Wait, but I heard you talk about how, you were assisting millennials essentially that are making 400K to 1.2 million. I mean, what kinds of jobs are those? And what percentage of millennials are making that? Because I've lived in a lot of big cities and very few people are making that kind of money.
Of course. And I'll address that because this is not a wealth management firm for, that it is going top shelf. It is going for those who have extremely high trajectory. And you think about where those opportunities, you can play this game in only so many cities, right? San Francisco, LA, Miami, you get the idea here. It's got to be a major city because you need enough, high achieving young people to make a client base out of. And I knew I could do that in New York City. You asked who they are, or rather what they do. When you have an attorney wife, you get exposed to lawyers who are, making good money at big law firms. You have financiers and bankers that you have all of Wall Street at your disposal. And that's nothing on the entrepreneurs, right? And the startup founders and the people who are really taking the experience out of the big firms to go create something of their own. Those are the most exciting, no offense to my lawyer and banker clients, they understand this, but that's where things get crazy, right? And now you go into the last 4 or 5 years where, no shortage of
fire alarm.
Perfect timing. We'll pause there and I'll pick up right where we left off. So the entrepreneurs were just this whole other, pathway to go down, and why I liked it so much, not just because of the upside or the opportunity to work with them. It was the experience that they would give me to be a multifaceted advisor to show how we can advise around the creation of businesses, look at problems that they're solving and lend those solutions to other clients going through that as well. It really just started putting tools in my tool belt, and also clients in chairs and assets in accounts as well. But it would be year in, year out, media, SEO, credibility, all of that over and over and over and over again, to where I would say just, I almost feel like COVID in 2020 was the match to all the gas, that I've been storing up in doing all of that. Yes, clients were coming. I'm like, wow, okay. Because my biggest problem, and I think the hardest thing for anyone looking to go into wealth management or become a financial advisor, for those listening that want to do this, the hardest thing is, of course, developing the business, because it's you. It's you. You're selling yourself, of course. But that's the hardest part in creating a pipeline that doesn't involve organic growth. So not buying retiring advisors' practices or buying clients, all legitimate ways to go about it. That's what's really hard. And to do it without having a big organization behind you or a big team that can feed you clients, it's super, super, super hard. I had no choice. I had to figure that out. And that's why I kept doing this year in and year out. So once I saw it working, like people would fill out a complimentary consultation form, I got so excited. I went all in, and I left my partner at the time who wanted to grow by acquisition. I'm like, I think I got this. And we just didn't see eye to eye on that. And I started Bona Fide Wealth in December 1st of 2016. So coming up on 5 years of being like, you know what, I'm just going to go pursue this full time now and not really rely on anything else.
Amazing. Well, I just out of curiosity, what is the history of financial planning? Because I would imagine that decades ago, I don't know, people didn't really need financial planners. It was so much more simple then. And now I feel like you have to, it's one of the things that Bitcoiners love to talk about, right? You have to have this sophisticated portfolio manager that's going to know, where to get the most appreciation and which stocks to invest in. Like, why do we need this?
Yeah, I don't
so
know
hard?
that you do need a lot of that. I think it's about asymmetry to symmetry of information. So think the internet's here again. Before the free flow of communication becoming symmetrical, you and I can go find any bit of public financial data like that, do your own due diligence, your own research, check out what narratives are in play through social media. The tool set you have, to figure out how to invest is the greatest it's ever been. The gatekeepers are the lowest they've ever been. And investing was a rich man's game, and still to this day, it more or less is. When you look at the people who don't own a single stock, or Satoshi for that matter, just don't own any kind of asset like
It's
that.
like half of this
It's
country.
like 51 or 49% or something ridiculous like that. So big macro perspective here. Let's get based. So
so we need financial advisors like you because it's just more complicated now, right?
okay. So how complicated it's become is obviously the value, opportunity that I have in working with people. We were talking about how you don't need a lot to do the heavy lifting of the investment side, right? Robos can do it, Betterment, Wealthfront. You can do it for free through Vanguard, Fidelity, Robinhood, pick your custodian, right? But the advice and the planning piece, right? We're talking evolution of this. As soon as the information started to become free flowing, you can't make your value proposition on the thing that's becoming commoditized. You just got to be very specific. In other words, you want to find people who find value in you doing the commoditized thing. And I'm very, very, it's going to sound like talking your book here, but I'm very straightforward with my prospects and clients that when it comes to investment management, the majority of that is us doing the heavy lifting of something they don't want to do on their own. We're saving them time. It's not a lack of wherewithal or intelligence. Most of them are smarter than me and have the ability to, they don't want to do it. Right? We're talking 30-something-year-olds chasing around 2 kids. Their time is precious. That's the value on the investment management side, not writing covered calls on Apple in an S&P 500 portfolio and being like, look at the alpha I generated. That's every Morgan Stanley financial advisor on earth. That ain't nothing special. Probably still not beating the S&P 500 or whatever benchmark to make it look like, there's more going on than just disciplined index investing in risk-adjusted portfolios. Again, creating limited value there, maybe a lot of value for some people, but generally speaking, limited compared to the unlimited value you can generate helping people make decisions around their financial life, from cash management, insurance, estate planning, retirement, investment, and tax planning. There, I just got all of them. Education planning, throw it in there too. That's comprehensive planning that you can build a relationship around, that you can be with people for their entire lives and be valuable to them, because it's not just numbers on a paper, it's people and their lives and the vested interest you have in being a real fiduciary and actually caring about the human being, not how much money they bring into a wrap account so you can charge your 1%. Yeah, as a capitalist, as someone who says I like to make money, that's good too, but that's second to the part that says I'm going to have the heart of a social worker, but the brain of a capitalist.
Wow, I like that. Wait, so what's the biggest mistake millennials make that prevents them from being wealthy?
I think it's the same mistake that everyone makes, and it's not having a foundation in financial education and personal finance. I just think the traps you can fall into are far greater today than they were before. You had to walk to the store to accidentally spend a couple bucks on candy or gum or whatever. Today, you can swipe on your phone and all of a sudden commit yourself to 10 payments of $4.99 to buy a sick pair of jeans that you probably shouldn't have bought. See, it's just, there's easier ways to get lost. There's easier ways to fall into financial traps. And those traps now have the ability to set you back further in making a bad decision or the wrong decision than any other time. It's precarious out, it's prickly, right? And that's why it's so much more important now than ever to have fundamentals. Where's your money coming in? Where is it going out? Be in control of that. Spare the judgment of what you're spending your money on for later. Why don't you focus on just figuring out where it's going, right? That's numbers. That's just following money again, right? Get that right. Right. And then you hear everyone say 70% of personal finance is, spending less than you make, having an emergency fund and knowing
Make
what
your
your goals
coffee at
are.
home.
Yeah, make your coffee at home. I'm, speaking my drip there.
Yeah,
But
no, it's really funny.
that's it.
I heard you talk about on another show, the idea of looking at your behavior, right? Where did you spend your money? Go look back at the last year. And I was like thinking about how people, I bet, don't want to do that. It's just like thinking about what did you eat in the last week or month? It's kind of like, I don't want to see what I ate because it's gonna scare me.
Clients all the time in data gathering, they have to it's optional, but they put together a budget or where they think, cash flow, where they think their money's going with no paper trail whatsoever. It's literally bullshit. It's their guess of where, like, oh, I know what rent is. I know what my car payment is. They have no idea where the rest is going. And then that's not everyone. There are some super organized, amazing people who come to the table like, look at this. I'm like, all right, why are you even paying me? You got this. Now, there's a lot to talk about beyond, just that foundational area, but we sometimes spend years getting this part right, especially in working with clients in their 20s and early 30s, so that they can get into asset accumulation mode, right? That's where you start building wealth. When you can get over the foundational, so where millennials, just like everyone else, get it wrong, not building that and not being able to get into asset accumulation. And look, you can say, and you hear this a lot out of, younger investors now, which is, forget all of that, just get money into assets. And yeah, I mean, that's under the notion that the sooner you can get money in the market or in investments, the more you can compound. I get that. And I know what I'm saying kind of flies in the face of that a little bit. My point is that if you can't stay invested, what's the point of being invested in the first place? And the way that you stay invested is by taking the time to build the foundation around cash management, protecting yourself with hopefully the right amount of cash that I know, I get it. It doesn't get you anything. It gets you to sleep well at night and peace of mind, and it greases the wheel of the big financial goals like buying homes and stuff like that you're going to need cash for. You just need it until we have better stuff out there. So for me, that's, that's why people find themselves, in a lot of situations that they don't need to be in.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's segue to talking about my favorite asset, which is Bitcoin. I'm curious to know when and how did you discover Bitcoin? What are your thoughts on it? And, there are a lot of financial planners out there and they are like anti-crypto. They don't want to touch it. So obviously you felt differently, right? So what's your Bitcoin journey?
So my journey is pretty cool. I got a phone call back in 2013 after, I think, just getting back from my honeymoon with Heather. And my really good friend Seth calls me up. He's studying neurobiology down in UT Austin. He's definitely one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And a childhood buddy. And he starts going off about Terra hashing and miners and Bitcoin and the blockchain. I mean, I've never heard of these words in my life. And I'm like, okay, space magic money, got it, from the internet. I might not have known what he was saying or half of what he was saying, or most of what he was saying. But I knew when someone was going to be asking me for money. So I'm like, cut to the chase. What do you want? And he's just like, let's buy this Bitcoin miner, $3,000 each. I'll be, general partner. You be limit. I'll handle it all. I'll set you up. We'll split it 50-50. What do you say? I'm like, I got to get Seth off the phone. He's not getting $3,000 from me, but I know how to do this without hurting his feelings. I look over at my new wife, Heather, and I'm like, hey, Heath, Seth wants $3,000 for some crazy computer. And she's like, super smart stuff. That guy, yeah, give him the money. So my whole plan to get Seth off the phone backfired on me. And I ended up wiring him $3,000 later that day. He secured the miner And we even went down to Austin to visit him while, we were procuring it or they were building it. And we went to some office park in the middle of Austin where the company, and they're like, what are you guys doing here? It was so weird. Seth had like a million questions for them. Months later, we get the miner, he sets it up. We start, we get into a hash pool, we start pooling our resources and we start mining Bitcoin. And I see the deposits on a weekly basis in my digital wallet, got my pass, don't ever lose this. That's in a safe somewhere. And at $400, $500, $600 a Bitcoin, I got some coins. And I don't really think much of it because it's 2014. Like the miner expired it couldn't keep up with its processing power. 6 months later, it became a paperweight and, kind of just chilled until December 2017 came around. And that was a moment where a lot of friends and people finally heard what Bitcoin was for the first time. And a lot of friends called me up. They're like, hey, I'm like, this is crazy.
Wait, so did you keep those Bitcoins? You didn't sell them? And did you not like upgrade to more miners? You didn't want to continue down that path? You didn't see it?
I was getting my career going. I just got married and now the focus was on Heather's legal career and my financial advisory practice. And, I didn't quite, have the itch at that point other than like, I knew more than most. I'm living through drawdowns. I did note that going through the volatility, certainly going up to 20,000 a coin, and then really dealing with volatility from 20 on down to 3 to where we are now and everything in between probably made me a much more patient investor for the sake of my clients. And what I was able to learn over many, many, many years, I'm now in a driver's seat, if not in the front row seat, I think is the better analogy of where we find from where we were 8 years ago, 9 years ago to where we are right now, understanding, educating, being not behind the 8 ball, but alongside of it. And maybe I think it's hard to get in front of it because it's evolving so fast. I go from days from saying like nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. Nobody knows what they're doing. Those who look like they do are just really good at making it seem like they know what they're talking about too. Okay, these nerds over here really have some knowledge that I can't get my brain power around. Let me try and figure this out in a way I understand. And then there's literally 99.9% of people who have no idea what this stuff is.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at, is turning that into 90, 80, 70, 50, 40 people having digital wallets and being able to use the ecosystem or the rails of decentralized finance. I think that's going to be the next big thing, is the indoctrination.
So when and how deep did you go down the rabbit hole? Because once you start to just immerse yourself in this, I mean, in my opinion, it like changes your whole worldview. You start thinking about what the central bank is doing and money printing and how it's like impacting every layer of society and wealth inequality. So like, did you have that journey as well at all?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I work in centralized fund. My whole business operates around the existing rails, right? And you can't. And one of the things that bothers me is when I see, and I was vocal about it, anyone say fire your financial advisor, if they're not recommending Bitcoin. And here I am, probably one of the most pro financial advisors when it comes to Bitcoin and decentralized finance. And comments like that fly in the face of business considerations, regulatory considerations, practical considerations that I have to make as an owner operator and a fiduciary for my clients. It's not that easy, guys. It pains me, right, that I can't go do that. Right. And people be like, oh, you can. It's like, dude, you don't run a practice. You don't know. You literally have no idea what you're talking about. Yet I know what you're talking about because I probably know more about what you're talking about than you do, but go ahead. I'm wearing a suit in my profile picture. I'm a boomer who doesn't get it. But it's frustrating. We all gotta be on the same team and page here, from those who are advocates within the system and those who are fighting the system. It's like, look, stop bifurcating this thing, right? Let's figure out where the connections are and how we can all help with this. So, for me, I think it got more real beyond just being a holder or a hodler of Bitcoin, right? And dealing with volatility and seeing big numbers and things that For me, the journey of being a professional in traditional finance and trying to learn as much as I can about decentralized finance is, I mean, it's like a bipolar operation here, right? Having one foot in each world is probably something a lot of people in the DeFi space can relate to, right? But for me, it's been very interesting. I want the Bitcoin ETF so I can just finally get my clients exposure in a way that's most congruent with how I do business. Like we manage close to $100 million. That's a drop in client assets. That is insignificant to the $5 billion RIA, which, by the way, is also an insignificant amount of money in the financial system. So when you say, hey, you should be doing X, Y, and Z for your clients, well, it causes all of these things to have to change. I don't have that scale, that money. Like, okay, fine. I will, to do what you are asking me to do, I literally would lose my business or take risks that are not acceptable or practical or sometimes legal, right? So that part really kind of pains me on my journey, but it's just a bump. It's just a bump. We're all kind of getting to the same destination here. We're all in the same sandbox, playing around with new tools and new things. And as I'm playing around in this sandbox, then comes NFTs, right? Then comes NFTs where I'm like, very just like everybody else, the oohs and ahs and the oh my gods from $1 million ETH JPEGs and people flipping and what, I think is the most, widely used connotation of NFTs and PFP projects. And I'm like, no, that's so surface level. Gotta go. If there's anything I learned about decentralized finance is go deeper. When and where does this get into our underlying tech that we use every day? Where's utility? When is my mom going to be doing an app that takes advantage of Ethereum smart contracts or leverages NFTs, whether it's on Solana or Ethereum or wherever? And that, I think, for me was, oh my God, that actually was this is so massive. It's going to change every aspect of business and finance. And look, there's people who got that, and the second they learned about, blockchain or the Bitcoin blockchain, and you got to understand, it's been okay. Kudos to you. When you got kids and a family, you can't just go, yeah, let's go do. It's risky. It's risky, and it's probably going to pay off for those who are taking that risk, or at least. I won't say that, but the rewards that are there for that level of risk are massive, hence FOMO and FUD and all of these things that enter the zeitgeist of, blockchain and Bitcoin and all of that. But when I saw the visual representation and how it was going to morph, it showed me how the rails of DeFi were being built. And I was just like, wow. And I added to positions, I think, or, bought an NFT mostly to learn and play. And that turned out to be a good venture, and hopefully, it was cool. Shout out to Cryptodes. That was fun. But it was a way for me to get in the sandbox and play around with it, because that's what you got to do, right? Go get a Satoshi. I would educate yourself before you allocate, but then go allocate a little bit just so you can play with the stuff, because we're not there yet, right? From your bank account to an exchange to a MetaMask wallet to OpenSea to, good God, nobody wants to do that. Yeah. Right. And it's going to get better and easier. So my journey from Bitcoin took a long, long time to really see how big this was going to be. And it really came through tinkering with it and playing around with it. So that would be my biggest, takeaway from this convo for anyone listening is go play with something.
Yeah. Well,
play with something that won't hurt you or bankrupt you or put you in harm's way, but go get a feel for this, because I really think even listening to folks like you and I, who are awesome at talking about this in ways that people can understand without feeling threatened, I don't even think that's good enough. You got to go play.
Well, just out of curiosity, I mean, as far as allocation, what do you recommend to clients, and where do you see Bitcoin going in the long term? Like, are you one of the people who believes that this could be a global reserve currency and that more countries will put it on their balance sheets?
Yeah, I think that I come from will educate my client 0 to 100 on anything they want to be educated on. And that includes understanding how exposure to digital assets or Bitcoin affects their financial plans and their allocations. There's nothing wrong with educating your client around, here's what this will do, here's what you can expect, can you stomach this volatility, here's what we hope it accomplishes as a non-correlated asset unlike anything else out there. Here's how we think about 5, 10, 15, 20, 30% allocations or of any asset, let alone this asset. If you can get good at that as an advisor, you're doing 99% of what you need to do. But what we can't do comfortably yet is make the solicitation to buy or sell crypto. Or at least I'm not at my scale, my size. I don't even have an error and omissions insurance policy provider that will cover me for that. So when I say real practical business stuff, these are the things I'm talking about, but it doesn't mean I can't participate and be an advocate and help media and help clients. By the way, they're coming in with exposure already. They know where I stand. They've read my articles and my journey and my podcast and this one. I don't have anything to prove to them that I know what I'm talking about and can educate them. There it is. The credibility comes back full circle. That's my value. So it's not even like, yeah, come on, let's go open. I can't open you that Coinbase account. I can't go put you on Gemini. I can't do that now. And I don't even know if that's what I'd want to do if it was a tool that I could use, right? I hope there is infrastructure for investment advisors that can open a digital wallet, have that information feed into the custodian that we're using, a Schwab, an NFS, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, Interactive Brokers. Those on-ramps and off-ramps, shout out to on-ramp, they don't exist for me in a practical way yet. And probably an EFT is going to beat them to it. So I can just plug that in. Now you ask, well, what would that allocation be? I could see our core risk-adjusted portfolios having Bitcoin in it. And the question is, will I have a separate core stack like, core plus Bitcoin and keep core? I think that's probably the way to go because I know there will be people who don't want to participate. But I would say, hey, if it was me and we're talking an 80-20 risk-adjusted portfolio, is it going to be 5 or 10%? How much out of equities and which equities? How much out of fixed income? Should it be the majority out of fixed income because bonds for young people, other than volatility dampener, why is it there? These are the things that I think about as a operator of a wealth management firm that, people have the luxury of not needing to think about. Now, if you talk to me as Doug, the crypto investor, not the financial advisor, yeah, let's go chop it up over, everything that's out there and seeing what's exciting. These are two very different, people, because I gotta play within some lines here.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, but you didn't answer the second question. Do you think it could be like a global reserve asset? Like, where do you see it going long term?
Yeah. For me, Bitcoin's digital gold. It's something that's been said many, many times. I'm not the first person to say that. I think it is probably the most amazing store of value out there. You want to go back to people running out of countries with all their belongings. Now you can do it with a flash drive, not a bag of bricks of gold. That's not going to work. So in the very go to the extreme situations to paint the picture here. I'm not here to transact with it, at least not right now anyways. If it was steady state price and it's like all 21 million are out there, everyone knows one Bitcoin equals $1 million, whatever it is, then maybe we can transact with it. Evolution of Lightning Network, I'm excited. I'm here for it. But global reserve currency, it could fill that void. Or it could just be 5 times bigger than gold, and I use gold as a proxy for, hey, when I'm talking to people, if you think Bitcoin, it's good store value. Well, do you think it's half as good as gold or twice as good as gold? And they're like, oh, maybe twice. I'm like, okay, that's a $20 trillion market cap. We're at 1.2.
Yeah.
You put an 18x multiple on it. What do you think about the asset class now?
Okay, well, to start to wrap up, I was curious about your thoughts on sort of the macro environment right now, because there are a lot of people who actually believe that we're primed for a big crash. We have so much leverage in the system. We have this bubble in assets, the stock market, record highs, median home prices are going up, like 24% a year, huge bubble, it feels like in the real estate market, they're printing. What do you think is going to happen? Are you one of the people who think that there's going to be a major correction? Or what do you think about the macro environment? Are we moving towards inflation, like real inflation?
Yeah, I don't think we're moving towards real inflation. I think we're seeing the the aftermath of everyone's reaction to COVID and how our supply chain and our systems all are now, the things you couldn't see at the time are all smashing into each other and creating, a lot of disruption. You can also point fingers at, government from municipal levels to the federal level, like go get, the Army Reserve out there and let's get some shipping containers where they need to go. Like, this is just lifting up heavy thing operation. There's threads about this on Twitter of how to solve this problem. But I don't think, I think it's hard to go backwards in pricing after you've increased it. So you might see, that kind of inflationary pressure take hold on very specific type stuff. I think it's way too early to be definitive about, the inflation question. The thing I go to is jobs, right? If we want inflation, show me rip roaring, job numbers. I haven't quite seen that yet. Still kind of on the fumes of stimulus and, making sure people survive through the pandemic. So I think it's early to say like, I'm not in the hyperinflation camp. I'm in, if we have inflation, then like we've had it before, you need assets here, so it creates a pretty attractive market. It only furthers what many people think are ridiculous asset prices, in equities, in real estate, in everywhere, and then you got the people who don't think that, think the crypto, and there are ridiculous prices, certainly in the altcoin space as well. It's everywhere. Let's not pretend, all of crypto or DeFi is immune to the effects that we're going through right now. So we'll see. I know that's not the most definitive thing, but I'm not in a hyperinflation camp here whatsoever.
Got it. Okay, well, the last thing I want to just chat with you about is your Twitter. You're so funny. You're like a stand-up comedian. Like, were you a stand-up comedian at any point? I mean, how do you come up with these one-liners? Because they're hilarious, they're awesome, and they really tap into just a lot of core truths about the way we spend money, millennials, and just, this crazy world we live in with meme stocks and Robinhood and all that. So how do you come up with these?
I don't know. I'm just a social butterfly. I've always used humor in everything I do, always finding something, life, if you take it too seriously, it's really going to suck. And, obviously to a fault here, know when to be serious, know when the moment doesn't call for humor, but almost every moment does call for humor, to put smiles on people's faces, to get them through tougher conversations. It's the most amazing tool that we're given. And I just love using it. And, you get addicted to Twitter. You can see where narratives come from, build an audience. I love this stuff, probably for good reasons and a lot of bad reasons, right? Mental health check and stuff like that. But I'm just built for it. Some are built different. I'm built to do this. I love jokes. I love comedy. I try and find the story of the day and take often a cynical approach to it. But the thing I do the most is I make fun of myself. I get my wife to make fun of me. You want humor to work? Don't make fun of people, make fun of yourself. It almost always works. So I've been having a lot of fun there. It brings in some clients every now and then, helps us meet each other and do stuff like this. So I appreciate that. It's getting hard to come up with something, there's only so much to talk about in personal finance. I feel like I'm pandering to the crowd like every time I tweet now, but they love the hits. So, don't ever go to a concert and you don't get the hits, you're going to be upset.
Thanks so much, Doug.
Thanks.